Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane's laughter echoed across the concrete firing range at Fort Meridian Advanced Marksmanship Training Center. His weathered face twisted with disbelief as he stared at the custom pink Barrett MA2 A1 rifle case that 19-year-old Private First Class Isabella "Izzy" Martinez had just placed on the equipment table. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What in the hell is that supposed to be, Martinez? Kane bellowed, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 15 years breaking down recruits and building soldiers. Did you get lost on your way to a toy store? The snickers from the other trainees rippled through the morning air like wildfire. 23 of the military's most promising marksmen had been selected for this elite precision shooting program, and none of them had expected to see what looked like a child's fantasy weapon among the serious black and tan rifles that dominated. The ranged Isabella kept her expression neutral, her dark eyes fixed straight ahead as she'd been trained. At barely 5'4" and weighing maybe 120 pounds soaking wet, she already stood out among the predominantly male group of soldiers who towered over her small frame. The pink rifle case only amplified the visual disconnect between her appearance and the deadly serious nature of their training mission. "Sir, this is my personal rifle, properly registered and approved for training use," Isabella replied, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. Her slight Texas accent carried a hint of steel that Kane was too focused on the rifle's appearance to notice. Gunnery Sergeant Rachel Thompson, the range's secondary instructor, approached with curiosity rather than mockery. At 38, Thompson had seen enough in her military career to know that judging equipment by appearance was a rookie mistake. But even she couldn't hide her surprise at the weapon Isabella was now carefully removing from its custom case. Rifle was undeniably impressive from a technical standpoint. What appeared to be a standard Barrett M82, a 1.50 caliber sniper rifle, had been completely customized with precision modifications that would have cost more than most soldiers made in 6 months. The distinctive pink coating wasn't cheap spray paint or amateur work. It was a professional, Cerakote finish that probably provided better corrosion resistance than standard military coatings. "Martinez, where exactly did you acquire this unique firearm?" Thompson asked, her tone professional but clearly intrigued by the obvious quality of the weapon's modifications. "It belonged to my sister, ma'am," Isabella answered, carefully checking the rifle's condition with movements that demonstrated familiarity and respect for the weapon. "She passed away 2 years ago, left it to me along with her shooting gear." The casual mention of her sister's death created an uncomfortable silence among the group. Several trainees shifted awkwardly, suddenly less amused by what they had initially perceived as a joke or attention-seeking stunt. Staff Sergeant Kane, however, remained focused on what he saw as a discipline issue. "Private Martinez, this is a serious training program for elite military marksmen. We don't have time for sentiment or fashion statements. If you can't take this seriously, you don't belong here." "Sir, I take this very seriously," Isabella replied, her voice gaining strength. "My sister was Staff Sergeant Elena Martinez, and she held the unofficial record for longest confirmed kill shot by a female sniper. This rifle helped her save lives overseas." The name hit Thompson like a physical blow. Elena Martinez had been legendary in certain military circles, a sniper whose skills had been whispered about in respectful tones among precision shooting instructors. Her unconventional methods and remarkable accuracy had earned her unofficial recognition that official records couldn't acknowledge due to the classified nature of her missions. "Elena Martinez was your sister?" Thompson asked, her entire demeanor shifting from curiosity to something approaching reverence. Kane noticed the change in Thompson's tone but didn't understand its significance. His experience with elite marksmen was limited to the training environment. And he'd never heard of Elena Martinez or her accomplishments in actual combat situations. "Yes, ma'am. She taught me everything she knew before she deployed for her final tour," Isabella said, her voice carrying both pride and pain. "She always said that people would underestimate the pink rifle, and that would be their mistake." The other trainees were beginning to pay closer attention now. Corporal Jake Williams, a cocky 22-year-old from Alabama who had dominated the preliminary shooting trials, stepped closer to examine the weapon with newfound interest. "So your dead sister's pink gun is supposed to make you special?" Williams asked with a smirk that didn't quite hide his uncertainty. "Hate to break it to you, sweetheart, but inheritance doesn't equal skill." Isabella's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. "No, sir. My training equals skill. The rifle is just a tool. Tools are only as good as the person using them," added Private Tommy Chun, a lanky kid from California whose own shooting scores had barely qualified him for the program. "And frankly, you don't look like sniper material." The comments were becoming increasingly personal, but Isabella had expected this type of reception. Her sister had warned her that the military's precision shooting community was dominated by men who sometimes struggled to accept that exceptional marksmanship could come in unexpected packages. Staff Sergeant Kane was growing impatient with what he perceived as unnecessary drama disrupting his training schedule. "All right, enough chatter. Martinez, if you think that toy rifle makes you special, you can prove it on the range. But when you wash out of this program, I don't want to hear any excuses about equipment or emotional baggage." "Sir, I won't need excuses," Isabella replied quietly. Thompson began setting up the morning shooting exercise, a standard precision test at 800 meters using military-issue ammunition. The targets were steel plates designed to provide immediate audio feedback when hit, eliminating any ambiguity about accuracy. "Standard protocol," Thompson announced to the group. "Each shooter gets 5 rounds to establish their baseline accuracy. We'll work through the roster alphabetically, starting with Chun." Private Chun approached the firing line with his standard-issue M24 rifle, a weapon he'd trained with extensively during his preparation for the program. His shooting position was textbook perfect, his breathing controlled, his trigger control smooth and deliberate. 4 of his 5 shots found their targets, producing the distinctive ring of steel that indicated successful hits. It was a respectable performance that would have been impressive in most military contexts. Williams followed with his personally modified M40A5, a rifle he'd spent months fine-tuning for competitive shooting. His results were marginally better. All 5 shots hit the steel plates, though his grouping showed room for improvement. One by one, the other trainees took their turns, establishing a baseline that ranged from adequate to impressive. The average hit rate was running about 80%, which Thompson considered acceptable for the first day of training. Finally, Kane called Isabella's name with obvious reluctance. "Martinez, you're up. Let's see what that pink princess rifle can do." Isabella approached the firing line carrying the Barrett with easy confidence, her movements economical and precise. The rifle's weight, nearly 30 pounds when fully loaded, didn't seem to burden her small frame as much as the observers expected. She settled into a prone position with fluid grace, adjusting the rifle's bipod and checking her scope settings. With the systematic thoroughness of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times, her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that serious marksmen developed through years of practice. The first shot rang out with the distinctive boom of the .50 caliber round. The steel target's response was immediate, a sharp clang that seemed louder and more definitive than the sounds produced by the smaller caliber rifles that had preceded it. The second shot followed 10 seconds later with identical results. Then the third, fourth, and fifth, each producing the same unmistakable sound of perfect accuracy. Thompson lowered her binoculars with an expression of growing amazement. Through the magnified optics, she could see that Isabella's shots hadn't just hit the targets. They had grouped so tightly that the bullet holes were nearly touching each other. "Clean sweep," Thompson announced, her voice carrying a note of professional respect that hadn't been present earlier. Perfect score with exceptional grouping. The range fell silent except for the distant sound of wind moving through the pine trees that surrounded the training facility. The casual mockery that had characterized the morning's atmosphere evaporated as the implications of Isabella's performance began to sink in. Kane stared at the target indicators with obvious confusion. He had expected the young woman to struggle with Barrett's substantial recoil and weight, possibly injuring herself in the process. Instead, she had delivered a shooting performance that exceeded anything he had witnessed. During his years as an instructor, Williams found himself re-evaluating his assumptions about both the pink rifle and the small woman who wielded it with such devastating effectiveness. His own shooting, which had seemed impressive moments earlier, now felt inadequate by comparison. "Beginner's luck," muttered Chun, though his voice lacked conviction. Isabella rose from the firing position and began cleaning her rifle with the same methodical care she had shown during setup. Her expression remained neutral, professional, giving no indication that she was surprised by her own performance or affected by the stunned silence of her fellow trainees. "Ma'am, permission to secure my equipment?" she asked Thompson, her tone respectful but confident. "Granted, Martinez," Thompson replied, still processing what she had witnessed. "Report for advanced training protocols tomorrow at 0600. As Isabella packed the pink Barrett back into its custom case, she could feel the weight of 23 pairs of eyes watching her every movement. The laughter and mockery that had greeted her arrival had been replaced by uncertain silence and grudging recognition that their assumptions about both her capabilities and her weapon had been completely wrong. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning sun was climbing higher over Fort Meridian, promising another scorching day in the Nevada desert. But the heat Isabella felt wasn't coming from the sun. It was the burn of proving herself in a world that had already decided she didn't belong. What none of them knew yet was that this was just the beginning. The pink Barrett M82A1 held secrets that would challenge everything they thought they knew about precision shooting, military history, and the true meaning of elite marksmanship. The evening sun cast long shadows across Isabella's barracks room. As she carefully disassembled the pink Barrett, each component laid out on a clean towel with the precision her sister had taught her. The day's shooting demonstration had earned her grudging respect from some trainees, but it had also attracted unwanted attention from people who asked too many questions. Gunnery Sergeant Thompson had requested a private meeting for the following morning, and Isabella suspected it wouldn't be about standard training protocols. Alina had warned her that exceptional performance always drew scrutiny, especially when it came attached to unconventional equipment and family connections that raised eyebrows in military intelligence circles. A soft knock interrupted her maintenance routine. Through the door's small window, she could see Private Sarah Mitchell, one of the few other women in the advanced marksmanship program. Unlike the male trainees who had treated Isabella with either mockery or suspicion, Mitchell had maintained professional neutrality throughout the day's events. "Come in," Isabella called. Not pausing in her methodical cleaning process, Mitchell entered carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had spent considerable time thinking about what she wanted to say. At 26, she was older than most of the other trainees. Her maturity earned through 3 combat deployments as a designated marksman with the 82nd Airborne Division. "Hell of a shooting display today," Mitchell said, offering one of the coffee cups. "Mind if I ask where you learned to handle a Barrett like that?" Isabella accepted the coffee gratefully. The day's stress had left her more drained than she'd expected, and the caffeine was exactly what she needed. My sister taught me. Started when I was 16. Spent every weekend for 2 years learning everything she knew. Elena Martinez, Mitchell said quietly. I heard Thompson mention her name. Rumor mill says she was something special in Afghanistan. The comment confirmed Isabella's suspicion that her sister's reputation extended further than official records indicated. Elena had always been secretive about her overseas assignments, sharing only general details about training and equipment, while avoiding specifics about missions or operational procedures. She never talked much about her deployments, Isabella replied honestly, but she was passionate about precision shooting. Said it was the difference between bringing soldiers home alive and sending families letters they never wanted to receive. Mitchell nodded with understanding. Her own combat experience had taught her the critical importance of accurate long-range shooting in protecting friendly forces. The difference between good and exceptional marksmanship could literally mean the difference between life and death for entire units. That rifle isn't standard military issue, Mitchell observed, studying the disassembled Barrett components. Someone put serious money into those modifications. Isabella had wondered about the same thing. The rifle's custom barrel, advanced optics, and precision trigger system represented upgrades that would have cost more than Elena's military salary could have afforded. When Isabella had inherited the weapon, she'd also received a locked metal case containing documentation she hadn't fully examined. Elena left some paperwork with the rifle, Isabella admitted. I haven't gone through all of it yet. Some of it looks like it might be classified. The admission created tension between them. Both women understood that possession of classified materials by unauthorized personnel was a serious federal crime that could result in court-martial and imprisonment. Mitchell's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Isabella, if you have classified documents, you need to turn them over to security immediately. That's not something you want to mess around with. I know, Isabella replied. But I also know that Elena wouldn't have left me anything that would get me in trouble. She was too careful, too professional. After Mitchell left, Isabella retrieved the locked case from her wall locker. The combination lock had been set to Elena's birth date, and inside she found documents that revealed aspects of her sister's military service that went far beyond standard sniper operations. The first folder contained training certificates from schools that didn't appear in any public military education catalogs, advanced reconnaissance courses, specialized weapons training, and psychological evaluation reports that used terminology Isabella didn't recognize. Elena's qualifications suggested involvement in programs that operated well outside conventional military structures. More troubling were the financial documents, showing payments to Elena from sources that weren't identified as standard military compensation. Large deposits had been made to her account following successful completion of assignments that weren't described in detail, but were referenced by code numbers that meant nothing to Isabella. The most significant discovery was a technical manual for the Barrett rifle modifications, written in Elena's precise handwriting. The document described enhancement techniques that went far beyond standard military specifications, including barrel modifications that extended effective range by nearly 30% and ammunition specifications that weren't available through normal supply channels. Isabella began to understand that her sister's pink Barrett wasn't just a custom rifle, it was a prototype for advanced sniper systems that might still be under development by military research programs. The pink coating wasn't a fashion statement. It was a distinctive marking that identified the weapon as belonging to a specific test program. A handwritten note tucked into the manual's back cover provided additional context that made Isabella's stomach tighten with apprehension. Izzy, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me and you've inherited more than just a rifle. The people who funded this project will eventually come looking for their investment. Don't trust anyone who asks too many questions about the weapon's capabilities. Our family's military service goes back 4 generations, and sometimes that service requires protecting secrets that others would kill for. Stay safe and remember that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones wearing the same uniform. Elena. The warning was cryptic but chilling. Elena had clearly been involved in activities that created ongoing risks for anyone associated with her work. Isabella realized that her impressive shooting demonstration might have attracted exactly the kind of attention Elena had warned her about. A second folder contained maps of Afghanistan marked with locations that appeared to be sniper positions and target areas. Detailed notes in Elena's handwriting described shots taken at distances that exceeded the Barrett's supposed maximum effective range, suggesting that the rifle modifications had been tested under actual combat conditions. One report documented a shot taken at 2,847 meters, nearly 1.75 miles, that had eliminated a high-value target, threatening an entire platoon of American soldiers. The technical details of the shot included environmental factors, ammunition specifications, and equipment modifications that read like a graduate-level physics dissertation on ballistics. Isabella found herself torn between pride in her sisters' extraordinary capabilities and fear about the implications of possessing such sensitive information. Elena had clearly been involved in classified programs that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in military marksmanship. The final document in the case was a sealed envelope marked "Open only if questioned about weapon origins." Isabella hesitated before breaking the seal, understanding that once she read its contents, she would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Inside was a single page, containing contact information for someone identified only as Colonel Harrison, Special Activities Division. A brief note indicated that if Isabella ever faced official inquiry about the rifle or Elena's service record, she should immediately contact Harrison using a secured communication protocol that was described in detail. The existence of such contingency plans confirmed Isabella's growing suspicion that Elena's death hadn't been the simple vehicle accident that military officials had described. The level of operational security surrounding her sister's work suggested involvement in programs that carried significant personal risk. Isabella's hands trembled slightly as she repackaged the documents and returned them to their locked case. Tomorrow's meeting with Gunnery Sergeant Thompson suddenly seemed much more significant than a routine discussion about training protocols. She spent the next hour researching what little public information was available about military special activities divisions and classified weapons testing programs. The search results were frustratingly vague, filled with official denials and bureaucratic language that obscured more than it revealed. What she did discover was that soldiers who participated in certain classified programs sometimes found themselves subject to lifetime monitoring and periodic questioning by intelligence agencies. Elena's warning about not trusting people in the same uniform began to make more sense. As midnight approached, Isabella made a decision that would define her path forward. She would attend tomorrow's meeting with Thompson, but she would also be prepared to contact Colonel Harrison if the questions became too specific or threatening. The pink Barrett represented more than her sister's legacy. It was a key to understanding military programs that operated in shadows most soldiers never knew existed. Isabella was beginning to realize that exceptional marksmanship skills might be the least significant aspect of what Elena had left her. Outside her barracks window, she noticed a vehicle with government plates parked in an area that was usually empty overnight. The surveillance, if that's what it was, suggested that her impressive shooting demonstration had already triggered interest from people who had questions about Elena Martinez and her mysterious pink rifle. Isabella carefully secured all the documents and prepared for what she suspected would be the first of many difficult conversations about her sister's true military service and the weapon that had made both of them targets of attention they never wanted. The administrative building at Fort Meridian felt different at 0600 hours, empty corridors echoing with the sound of Isabella's boots as she made her way to Gunnery Sergeant Thompson's office. The early morning meeting had been scheduled outside normal training hours, suggesting a level of privacy that made Isabella increasingly nervous about Thompson's true intentions. She found Thompson waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a thick folder that definitely wasn't standard training documentation. The older woman's expression was professionally neutral, but Isabella detected an undercurrent of tension that hadn't been present during yesterday's range activities. "Have a seat, Martinez," Thompson said, gesturing to a chair positioned directly across from her desk. "We need to discuss some irregularities that have come to light regarding your equipment and background." Isabella accepted the coffee while maintaining eye contact, a technique Elena had taught her for projecting confidence during difficult conversations. "What kind of irregularities, ma'am?" Thompson opened the folder and spread several documents across her desk. Isabella recognized some of them as copies of Elena's service records, but others appeared to be more recent intelligence reports with classification markings that made her stomach tighten with apprehension. "Your sister's military service included assignments that don't appear in standard personnel databases," Thompson began carefully. "Her final deployment involved attachment to units that operate under different command structures than conventional forces." The diplomatic language couldn't disguise what Thompson was really saying. Elena had been involved in special operations that carried classifications high enough to require security clearances beyond anything Isabella possessed. The implications were becoming clear. Her inheritance of the pink Barrett had connected her to military programs she wasn't authorized to know about. "Ma'am, I inherited Elena's personal property according to legal procedures," Isabella replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've done nothing wrong." "I'm not suggesting you have," Thompson said, though her tone carried undertones that weren't entirely reassuring. "But your demonstration yesterday has attracted attention from people who have questions about the weapon's capabilities and your knowledge of its modifications." Before Isabella could respond, the office door opened to admit 2 men in civilian clothes who carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. The taller of the 2, a stern-faced man in his 40s, approached Thompson's desk with credentials already in hand. "Agent David Kramer, Defense Intelligence Agency," he announced, showing his identification. "This is Agent Robert Torres. We need to speak with Private Martinez about classified materials that may have come into her possession." Isabella felt her pulse quicken as Elena's warnings about dangerous enemies in the same uniform suddenly became very real. These weren't military personnel following standard procedures. They were intelligence operatives whose presence suggested that her situation had escalated far beyond routine security concerns. "Agents, I wasn't expecting additional participants in this meeting," Thompson said, her voice carrying a note of professional irritation. "Private Martinez is scheduled for training activities that require my supervision." Agent Kramer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Sergeant Thompson, this matter takes priority over training schedules. We have reason to believe that Private Martinez possesses technical specifications for weapon systems that remain under active security classification." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Isabella understood that she was facing a choice that would define her immediate future: cooperate with agents whose motives weren't clear, or exercise her right to legal representation, while potentially appearing guilty of crimes she hadn't committed. "Sir, I've inherited my sister's personal property according to legal procedures," Isabella said, repeating her earlier statement with as much confidence as she could project. "If there are concerns about specific items, I'm willing to cooperate with proper legal channels." Agent Torres stepped forward with a folder of his own, spreading photographs across Thompson's desk that showed detailed images of the pink Barrett's modifications. The quality and specificity of the images suggested surveillance that had been conducted without Isabella's knowledge or consent. Private Martinez, these photographs were taken yesterday during your equipment maintenance, Torres explained. They show modifications that incorporate classified technical specifications developed under Department of Defense research contracts. Isabella studied the photographs with a growing alarm. The images showed details of her rifle that could only have been captured using specialized equipment and close proximity access. Someone had been watching her with professional surveillance techniques that went far beyond casual observation. How did you obtain these photographs? Thompson asked, her protective instincts engaging as she realized her subordinate was being subjected to investigation techniques that violated normal military protocols. That information is classified, Kramer replied dismissively. What matters is that Private Martinez is in possession of military property that exceeds her authorization level. The exchange was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel James Patterson, Fort Meridian's commanding officer, whose unexpected presence suggested that Isabella's situation had attracted attention at the highest levels of base command. Patterson's expression was grim as he surveyed the assembled group. Gentlemen, I wasn't informed that federal agents would be conducting interviews with my personnel, Patterson said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. This facility operates under military jurisdiction, and my soldiers are entitled to appropriate representation. Agent Kramer's response revealed the jurisdictional complexity of Isabella's situation. Colonel, this investigation involves classified programs that operate under civilian oversight. Our authority supersedes military command structure when national security interests are involved. The power struggle between military and civilian authority was creating an environment where Isabella's rights could easily be overlooked in favor of bureaucratic territoriality. She realized that Elena's emergency contact information might be her only protection against agencies whose motivations weren't necessarily aligned with her welfare. Meanwhile, word of the early morning meeting was spreading through the base's informal communication networks. Private Mitchell had noticed the unusual activity around the Fang administrative building and alerted other trainees who were beginning to ask questions about Isabella's sudden absence from morning formation. Staff Sergeant Kane was fielding inquiries from trainees who wanted to know Isabella was being removed from the program due to equipment violations or security concerns. The atmosphere in the training unit was becoming increasingly tense as speculation about her situation grew more dramatic with each retelling. Martinez is probably getting arrested for having illegal weapons, Corporal Williams announced to anyone who would listen. That pink rifle was obviously stolen military property. Private Chun was spreading his own theory that Isabella was a foreign agent who had infiltrated the training program using her sister's identity. The accusations were becoming increasingly paranoid as trainees competed to offer the most dramatic explanation for the federal investigation. Only Private Mitchell seemed concerned about Isabella's welfare rather than excited about the unfolding drama. Her combat experience had taught her to recognize when soldiers were being hung out to dry by bureaucratic processes that prioritized institutional protection over individual rights. Back in Thompson's office, the interrogation was becoming increasingly hostile as agents pressed Isabella for information about documents she had discovered in Elena's possessions. Their questions were specific enough to suggest prior knowledge of what Elena had left behind, raising troubling questions about how closely her sister had been monitored before her death. Private Martinez, we know that your sister maintained detailed records of classified operations, Torres said, leaning forward with obvious intensity. We need to recover those materials to prevent potential security breaches. Isabella felt the weight of Elena's warning about not trusting people in the same uniform. These agents were demanding access to information that Elena had specifically warned her to protect, suggesting that their investigation might not be motivated by legitimate security concerns. "Sir, if my sister left classified materials, then proper procedures would involve military intelligence channels rather than civilian agencies," Isabella replied, drawing on knowledge she had gained from Elena's training about protecting sensitive information. The response clearly frustrated both agents, who had expected cooperation rather than sophisticated understanding of jurisdictional protocols. Isabella's refusal to be intimidated was creating complications they hadn't anticipated. Colonel Patterson was watching the exchange with growing disapproval of the agent's techniques. His military experience included exposure to intelligence operations, and he recognized interrogation methods that exceeded appropriate boundaries for questioning military personnel. "Agents, I'm terminating this interview pending proper legal representation for Private Martinez," Patterson announced. "Any further questions will be conducted through appropriate military legal channels." Agent Kramer's expression hardened with obvious frustration. "Colonel, this investigation involves national security matters that require immediate resolution. Delays could compromise ongoing operations." "Then you should have followed proper procedures from the beginning," Patterson replied firmly. "Private Martinez will be available for questioning when she has appropriate legal counsel." As the meeting broke up with unresolved tensions and thinly veiled threats, Isabella realized that her exceptional shooting demonstration had triggered a chain of events that went far beyond anything she had anticipated. The Pink Barrett had become the center of a conflict between different levels of government authority, and she was caught in the middle with information that multiple agencies wanted to control. The morning sun was now streaming through Thompson's office windows, but Isabella felt like she was entering a darkness that Elena had tried to protect her from. The battle for her sister's legacy was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than anyone was willing to admit. The military legal office at Fort Meridian had never felt as crowded as it did 3 hours after Isabella's interrogation. Captain Jennifer Walsh, the base's senior judge advocate general officer, found herself mediating a jurisdictional nightmare that involved multiple federal agencies, each claiming authority over different aspects of what had begun as a simple question about training equipment. Isabella sat in a corner chair, still wearing her training fatigues, but now accompanied by Major Douglas Reynolds, a military defense attorney whose reputation for protecting soldiers' rights had made him enemies in intelligence circles. Reynolds had driven from Fort Carson specifically to represent Isabella, having been contacted through channels that remained mysterious to everyone except Isabella herself. "Captain Walsh, my client has committed no crimes and violated no regulations," Reynolds announced as he reviewed the stack of documents that various agencies had submitted as evidence of wrongdoing. "The allegations being made here are based on speculation and bureaucratic overreach." Agent Kramer shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly frustrated by the legal obstacles that were preventing him from accessing Elena's documents and examining the Pink Barrett more thoroughly. His investigation had been derailed by military protocols he hadn't anticipated, and his superiors were demanding results that seemed increasingly difficult to obtain. "Major Reynolds, your client possesses classified technical specifications that could compromise ongoing defense programs," Kramer replied, his tone carrying barely controlled irritation. "This goes beyond simple inheritance issues." Captain Walsh had spent the previous 2 hours researching the legal precedents for Isabella's situation, discovering that cases involving inherited classified materials existed in a gray area where military law intersected with federal security regulations in confusing ways. The complexity of the jurisdictional issues suggested that Isabella's case could drag on for months while different agencies fought over authority. "The fundamental question," Walsh observed, "is whether Private Martinez knowingly possessed classified materials or simply inherited personal property that happened to contain sensitive information. Intent matters in these cases. The distinction was crucial because it determined whether Isabella faced criminal charges or administrative procedures. If she had unknowingly inherited classified materials, proper protocol required secure transfer to appropriate authorities without criminal penalties. If she had deliberately sought access to classified information, she could face court-martial and federal prosecution. Reynolds had been studying Elena's service record with the attention to detail that had made him one of the military's most effective defense attorneys. What he discovered was a pattern of assignments and authorizations that suggested Elena Martinez had been involved in programs that operated well outside normal military channels. "Captain Walsh, I need to request a security review of Elena Martinez's complete service record," Reynolds announced. "The documentation provided by these agents appears to be incomplete and potentially misleading." The request triggered immediate objections from both federal agents, who clearly wanted to limit the scope of information that would be examined during Isabella's defense. Their resistance suggested that Elena's complete record contained information they preferred to keep hidden from military legal review. "Major, that information is classified beyond your security clearance," Torres interjected. "You're not authorized to review materials related to special activities operations." Reynolds smiled with the confidence of someone who had navigated similar bureaucratic obstacles many times before. "Agent Torres, my security clearance extends to top secret SCI with special activities endorsement. I'm fully authorized to review any materials related to my client's case." The revelation that Reynolds possessed clearances equivalent to intelligence operatives explained how he had been contacted so quickly and why he was willing to take Isabella's case. Someone with significant authority had arranged for her to receive legal representation that matched the level of opposition she was facing. While the legal maneuvering continued in the JAG office, the controversy surrounding Isabella was creating divisions throughout Fort Meridian that reflected deeper tensions about military culture and federal authority. The base's dining facility had become an unofficial forum for debates about security, transparency, and the rights of military families. Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez, a veteran instructor who had known Elena during her stateside training assignments, was defending Isabella against accusations from younger soldiers who viewed the federal investigation as evidence of wrongdoing. "Elena Martinez was one of the finest soldiers I ever served with," Rodriguez declared to a table full of trainees who were eager for insider information. "If these agents are hassling her sister, it's because they're looking for something that doesn't exist." The defense was challenged by Staff Sergeant Kane, who had convinced himself that Isabella's exceptional shooting performance was evidence of foreign training that compromised her loyalty to American military interests. His suspicions were being shared with anyone willing to listen, creating an atmosphere of paranoia that threatened unit cohesion. "Think about it," Kane argued during an impromptu gathering outside the barracks. "Where does a 19-year-old learn to shoot like that? Someone taught her techniques that go beyond anything we do in standard training. Foreign intelligence services recruit people exactly like her." The accusations were becoming increasingly elaborate as they spread through the base's informal communication networks. Some soldiers were convinced that Isabella was a sleeper agent, activated to infiltrate advanced weapons training programs. Others believed that Elena had been selling classified information to foreign governments before her death. Mitchell found herself defending Isabella against increasingly hostile speculation from fellow trainees who seemed more interested in drama than facts. Her efforts to provide rational explanations for Isabella's situation were being overwhelmed by conspiracy theories that grew more dramatic with each retelling. "You people sound like idiots," Mitchell announced during one particularly heated discussion. "Isabella is a soldier who inherited her sister's rifle. That's it. Everything else is paranoid speculation." The defense earned her suspicious looks from trainees who were beginning to question anyone who supported Isabella too strongly. The atmosphere of mutual suspicion was exactly what Elena had warned about in her notes, the corrosive effect of security investigations that turn soldiers against each other. Back in the JAG office, Reynolds was making discoveries that significantly complicated the federal agent's case against Isabella. Elena's complete service record revealed authorizations and clearances that suggested she had been working directly for agencies that operated above the level of normal military oversight. Gentlemen, it appears that Elena Martinez was authorized to possess classified technical specifications as part of her official duties, Reynolds announced, showing documents that both agents clearly hadn't expected to be revealed. Her inheritance of these materials to her sister appears to have been legally authorized. The revelation fundamentally changed the nature of Isabella's legal situation. If Elena had been legally authorized to possess classified materials, then her bequest of those materials to Isabella might also be legal. Depending on the specific terms of her security authorizations, Agent Kramer was clearly frustrated by the unexpected complexity of what he had assumed would be a straightforward case of unauthorized possession of classified materials. His investigation was being derailed by legal protections he hadn't known existed. Major Reynolds, authorization to possess classified materials doesn't automatically extend to inheritance rights, Kramer protested. There are specific procedures for handling classified materials after the death of authorized personnel, which procedures were apparently never followed, Reynolds replied with obvious satisfaction. Elena Martinez died in 2019, and no agency has contacted her family about recovering classified materials until now. The 3-year delay suggests either incompetence or deliberate neglect of proper protocols. Captain Walsh was beginning to understand that Isabella's case involved bureaucratic failures that extended far beyond her individual situation. Multiple agencies appeared to have lost track of classified materials and personnel authorizations, creating a situation where blame was being shifted to convenient targets rather than addressing systemic problems. The legal discussion was interrupted by an unexpected phone call that Captain Walsh took with obvious reluctance. After a brief conversation filled with "yes, sir" responses, she hung up with an expression that suggested significant new developments. Major Reynolds, your client has been requested for immediate transfer to a secure facility pending resolution of her security status, Walsh announced. The order comes from Department of Defense headquarters with authority that supersedes base command. The transfer order was clearly an attempt to remove Isabella from legal protections that were interfering with federal investigation goals. Reynolds recognized the tactic as a way of isolating defendants from advocates who might interfere with interrogation procedures. Captain, I need to see the specific authorization for this transfer, Reynolds demanded. My client is entitled to legal representation regardless of her location. As Walsh reached for the phone to request clarification of the transfer orders, the JJAG office door opened to admit someone whose presence immediately changed the entire dynamic of Isabella's situation. Colonel Marcus Harrison entered with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question, his civilian clothes and DoD credentials identifying him as exactly the person Elena had designated as Isabella's emergency contact. Major Reynolds, gentlemen, Harrison said, nodding to the assembled group with professional courtesy that carried undertones of barely controlled anger. I understand there's been some confusion about Private Martinez's legal status and the materials she inherited from her sister. Agent Kramer's expression shifted from frustration to something approaching concern as he recognized Harrison's name and authority. The colonel's presence suggested that Isabella's case had attracted attention from officials who operated at levels where careers could be destroyed with a single phone call. Sir, we're conducting a routine investigation into classified materials that may have been improperly transferred, Kramer said, his tone becoming noticeably more respectful. Harrison's smile was professionally polite, but carried implications that made both federal agents uncomfortable. Agent Kramer, there's nothing routine about threatening the family members of soldiers who died in service to classified programs that you're not authorized to know about. The statement revealed layers of classification and authority that went far beyond anything the agents had disclosed during their investigation. Harrison's presence confirmed that Elena's death and Isabella's inheritance were connected to programs that operated with levels of security that exceeded normal intelligence operations. Colonel, if you have information relevant to our investigation, we'd appreciate your cooperation, Torres said, though his voice lacked the confidence he had displayed earlier. Agent Torres, you're going to cease this investigation immediately and transfer all related materials to my custody, Harrison replied with matter-of-fact authority. Private Martinez and her inherited property are now under the jurisdiction of programs that operate above your security clearance. The bureaucratic power play was exactly what Elena had prepared for in her emergency protocols. Harrison's intervention was protecting Isabella from agencies whose authority was being superseded by officials with higher classification levels and broader operational mandates. Reynolds was watching the exchange with professional interest, recognizing that his client's situation was being resolved through channels that operated outside normal legal procedures. Harrison's authority was ending the federal investigation not through legal arguments, but through bureaucratic hierarchy that placed Isabella's case beyond the reach of DEA agents. Colonel Harrison, what happens to my client now? Reynolds asked, understanding that his role as defense attorney might be concluding as quickly as it had begun. Major, Private Martinez will be returning to her training schedule with appropriate security monitoring, Harrison replied. Her inherited materials will be properly cataloged and secured through appropriate channels. As the federal agents gathered their materials and prepared to leave with obvious reluctance, Isabella finally spoke for the first time since Harrison's arrival. Sir, Elena left instructions to contact you if there were problems. She said you would understand what she was protecting. Harrison's expression softened slightly as he studied Isabella with obvious recognition of her resemblance to Elena. Private Martinez, your sister was protecting secrets that most people aren't authorized to know exist. Your inheritance includes responsibilities as well as property. The statement confirmed that Isabella's situation was far from resolved, even though the immediate legal threats were being neutralized. Elena's legacy involved ongoing obligations that would continue to affect Isabella's military service and personal safety. As the meeting concluded and various officials departed, Isabella realized that she had survived the first major test of Elena's protective protocols. But Colonel Harrison's presence and authority suggested that her sister's secrets were more significant than even Isabella had imagined. The pink Barrett M8201 was more than a custom rifle. It was a key to understanding military programs that operated in shadows where accountability was replaced by classification levels that protected institutional secrets from democratic oversight. Isabella was about to discover that exceptional marksmanship was the least important aspect of what Elena had trained her to handle. The secure briefing room, deep within Fort Meridian's intelligence complex, had been designed for conversations that couldn't happen in normal administrative spaces. Soundproofed walls, electronic countermeasures, and access controls that required multiple authorizations created an environment where classified information could be discussed without fear of surveillance or compromise. Isabella found herself sitting across from Colonel Harrison at a metal table that held documents she was seeing for the first time, despite having lived with their consequences for the past week. The manila folders spread before her contained Elena's complete operational history, technical specifications for the Pink Barrett's modifications, and mission reports that revealed the true scope of her sister's military service. Private Martinez, before we continue, I need you to understand that everything we discuss today will be classified at levels that carry criminal penalties for unauthorized disclosure, Harrison said, his tone carrying both authority and genuine concern for her welfare. Once you know what Elena was really doing, you'll be subject to the same security obligations that governed her entire adult life. Isabella had spent the previous 24 hours considering this moment, understanding that learning the truth about Elena's legacy would fundamentally change her own military service and personal future. But the events of the past week had made clear that she was already involved in something far beyond normal military training, whether she understood it or not. "Sir, Elena left me information because she believed I needed to know," Isabella replied with more confidence than she felt. "I'd rather understand what I'm dealing with than continue operating in the dark." Harrison nodded with obvious approval of her decision, then opened the first folder to reveal photographs that documented Elena's involvement in operations that had never appeared in public military records. The images showed her sister in various international locations, carrying equipment that went far beyond standard sniper rifles, working with personnel who weren't identified by name or unit affiliation. Elena Martinez was recruited for Project Silhouette during her second deployment to Afghanistan, Harrison began, his voice taking on the clinical tone of someone briefing classified operations. The program was established to develop next-generation, precision engagement capabilities that could operate beyond the effective range of conventional sniper systems. The technical language couldn't disguise what Harrison was really describing. Elena had been selected for a classified program that pushed the boundaries of long-range killing technology, developing weapons and techniques that exceeded anything acknowledged in official military doctrine. Project Silhouette operatives were tasked with eliminating high-value targets at distances and under conditions that required equipment modifications not available through normal procurement channels, Harrison continued, showing Isabella technical documents that detailed the pink Barrett's enhancement specifications. Isabella studied the modification charts with a growing understanding of why federal agents had been so interested in her inherited rifle. The weapon represented developmental technology that was still classified, incorporating advances in barrel metallurgy, optical systems, and ammunition design that provided capabilities significantly beyond standard military equipment. "Sir, how far beyond normal capabilities?" Isabella asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer from Elena's handwritten notes about impossible shots taken in combat conditions. Harrison turned to a page that documented Elena's operational achievements, including verified target eliminations at distances that exceeded 3,000 meters, nearly 2 miles. The technical specifications showed that such shots required environmental calculations, ballistic computing, and equipment precision that operated at the edge of what physics made possible. "Your sister held the unofficial record for longest confirmed combat elimination," Harrison said with obvious pride. 3,247 meters in the Hindu Kush Mountains. A shot that saved an entire special operations team from Taliban forces that had them pinned down. The revelation explained Elena's legendary status among military marksmen, and why her death had created security concerns that persisted years after her deployment ended. She had possessed knowledge and capabilities that represented significant intelligence assets for any organization that could access them. "The pink coating on your rifle wasn't Elena's personal preference," Harrison continued, showing Isabella photographs of similar weapons carried by other Project Silhouette operatives. It was an identification system that marked prototype equipment belonging to classified development programs. Isabella began to understand that her impressive shooting demonstration had attracted federal attention not because of her individual skills, but because she had publicly displayed classified military technology that was supposed to remain hidden from unauthorized observation. Her inheritance had connected her to programs that operated with security levels that exceeded normal intelligence operations. "Colonel, why wasn't this equipment recovered when Elena died?" Isabella asked, recognizing that proper security protocols would have prevented her from inheriting classified materials in the first place. Harrison's expression grew troubled as He reached for a folder marked with classification stamps that Isabella couldn't read. Elena's death wasn't the vehicle accident that her family was told about. She was killed during a classified operation that went wrong, and in the chaos that followed, several pieces of Project Silhouette equipment were lost or unaccounted for. The admission that Elena had been murdered rather than killed accidentally fundamentally changed Isabella's understanding of her sister's death and her own current situation. If Elena had been targeted because of her involvement in classified programs, then Isabella's inheritance might represent ongoing danger rather than simple family legacy. "Sir, are you saying that Elena was assassinated?" Isabella asked, her voice barely steady as she processed the implications of Harrison's revelation. Private Martinez, Elena was eliminated by hostile intelligence operatives who were attempting to acquire Project Silhouette technology and operational information. Harrison replied with matter-of-fact precision that couldn't disguise the gravity of what he was describing. Her death was classified as accidental to protect the program's security and prevent enemy organizations from understanding what they had accomplished. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Sarah Chun, a civilian contractor, whose credentials identified her as a ballistics engineer working for the Department of Defense's Advanced Weapons Development Division. Her presence suggested that Isabella's briefing would include technical information that exceeded Colonel Harrison's expertise. "Private Martinez, I worked directly with your sister during the development of the Barrett modifications that you've inherited," Dr. Chun announced, settling into a chair with her own folder of technical documentation. Elena's field testing provided crucial data for improvements that are still being incorporated into current prototype systems. The revelation that Elena had been a test pilot for experimental weapons technology explained both the rifle's exceptional capabilities and the ongoing security concerns surrounding its possession. Isabella was inheriting equipment that represented ongoing research and development investments worth millions of dollars. "Ma'am, how advanced are the modifications compared to standard military rifles?" Isabella asked, though the question felt inadequate given what she was learning about her sister's true role. Dr. Chun opened her folder to reveal performance charts that documented the pink Barrett's capabilities in clinical detail. Effective range extended to nearly 4,000 meters under optimal conditions. Accuracy measurements that exceeded anything achievable with conventional equipment, and reliability specifications that had been tested under combat conditions that couldn't be replicated in laboratory environments. Your sister's rifle represents approximately 5 years of advanced development that won't be available to conventional military units for at least another decade, Dr. Chun explained. The barrel modifications alone incorporate metallurgical advances that are still classified at the highest levels. Isabella found herself struggling to process the magnitude of what Elena had been involved in and what she had inherited as a result. The pink Barrett wasn't just a custom rifle, it was a prototype for weapon systems that would define the future of military precision engagement capabilities. "Private Martinez, Elena left specific instructions about your training and development," Harrison said, opening another folder that contained curricula and training protocols that went far beyond anything offered in standard military marksman programs. "She believed that you possessed natural abilities that could be developed to continue her work." The suggestion that Elena had been preparing Isabella to follow in her footsteps was both thrilling and terrifying. Isabella understood that accepting such training would commit her to a military career that operated outside normal service structures, with risks and responsibilities that most soldiers never faced. "Sir, what kind of training are we talking about?" Isabella asked, though she suspected the answer would involve commitments that would fundamentally change her life trajectory. Dr. Chun reached for a training manual that bore classification markings higher than anything Isabella had previously been authorized to see. Advanced ballistics theory, environmental calculation systems, target analysis protocols. and equipment maintenance procedures that are specific to Project Silhouette systems. The training description made clear that Isabella would be learning skills that were classified as national security assets, creating legal obligations and security restrictions that would govern every aspect of her future military service and civilian life. The training program would require you to accept assignments to classified units that operate under different command structures than conventional forces, Harrison added. Your career path would become similar to Elena's, with deployments and responsibilities that couldn't be discussed with family or civilian friends. Isabella realized that she was being offered the opportunity to continue Elena's legacy, but accepting would mean embracing the same isolation and secrecy that had defined her sister's adult life. The choice represented a fundamental decision about what kind of person she wanted to become. Colonel, if I decline this training, what happens to the rifle and Elena's materials? Isabella asked, understanding that her decision would affect not just her own future, but the disposition of classified assets that belong to programs larger than individual preferences. The equipment would be recovered and secured through appropriate channels, Harrison replied. You would return to conventional military training with appropriate security monitoring, but without access to classified programs or materials. Choice was being presented as voluntary, but Isabella understood that her exceptional shooting abilities and inherited knowledge made her valuable to programs that didn't easily accept refusal. Elena's emergency protocols had protected her from immediate threats, but they had also connected her to obligations that extended beyond simple family inheritance. Sir, I need to understand something, Isabella said, gathering courage for a question that had been troubling her since Harrison's arrival. Are there other people like Elena still operating in these programs? Other soldiers whose families don't know what they're really doing? Harrison's expression suggested that Isabella's question touched on aspects of Project Silhouette that extended far beyond her individual situation. Private Martinez, there are currently 12 operatives working in various classified capacities around the world. Their families believe they're serving in conventional assignments. The revelation that Elena had been part of a larger network of covert operatives explained why her death had created security concerns that persisted years later. Each Project Silhouette operative possessed knowledge and capabilities that represented strategic assets for American intelligence operations. What happened to the people who killed Elena? Isabella asked, her voice carrying anger that had been building since she learned the truth about her sister's death. Harrison's pause suggested that Isabella's question involved ongoing operations that couldn't be discussed in detail. The hostile operatives responsible for Elena's death have been neutralized through appropriate channels. The organization that directed their activities continues to be monitored and disrupted when possible. The diplomatic language couldn't disguise that Elena's death had been avenged through classified operations that Isabella would never be allowed to know about in detail. The knowledge that justice had been delivered provided some emotional satisfaction, but also reinforced the dangerous nature of what she was being invited to join. Private Martinez, you don't have to decide today, Dr. Chun said, recognizing the overwhelming nature of what Isabella was being asked to consider. Elena's training protocols were designed to be implemented gradually, allowing you to develop skills while maintaining your current military obligations. The suggestion that Isabella could ease into Project Silhouette involvement rather than making an immediate commitment provided a canvas path forward that didn't require immediate life-changing decisions. She could honor Elena's legacy while maintaining some control over her own future trajectory. As the briefing concluded and Isabella prepared to return to her normal training schedule, she understood that her situation had fundamentally changed even if her daily routine remained the same. She now possessed knowledge that created permanent obligations to classified programs. Regardless of whether she chose to participate actively in their operations, the pink Barrett M8201 would remain in her possession. but under security monitoring that ensured its capabilities couldn't be observed or analyzed by unauthorized personnel. Her shooting demonstrations would continue, but with awareness that her performance was being evaluated by people who measured success in terms of national security assets rather than training achievements. Walking back to her barracks under the Nevada sun, Isabella realized that Elena's legacy involved much more than exceptional marksmanship skills or custom rifles. Her sister had been part of a shadow military that operated beyond public accountability, using capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what democratic societies typically authorize their governments to do. The choice of whether to continue. Elena's work would define not just Isabella's military career, but her understanding of what it meant to serve her country in ways that most citizens would never know about or approve of if they did. 3 weeks after her classified briefing with Colonel Harrison, Isabella found herself standing on a remote firing range 50 miles from Fort Meridian, surrounded by terrain that bore no resemblance to the standard training facilities she had known. The landscape stretched across high desert valleys where targets could be positioned at distances that would have been impossible on conventional ranges. Dr. Chun had established what she called a developmental testing environment, a sophisticated facility where the Pink Barrett's capabilities could be explored without concern for the safety limitations that govern normal military training. Isabella was about to discover exactly what Elena had been capable of, and whether she possessed the skills necessary to continue her sister's work. "Today we're going to establish her baseline performance parameters," announced Master Sergeant Kevin Rodriguez, a Project Silhouette instructor whose own service record remained classified at levels that prevented Isabella from learning his background. "Elena's training notes suggest you have natural abilities that exceed normal marksman development, but we need quantitative data." The first test involved targets positioned at 1,500 meters, a distance that would challenge experienced military snipers using conventional equipment. Isabella settled into a prone position with the Pink Barrett, adjusting the rifle's sophisticated optics while calculating environmental factors that Elena had taught her to consider instinctively: wind speed, humidity, altitude, temperature gradients, barometric pressure. The variables that affected long-range shooting required mental calculations that most marksmen needed computer assistance to manage accurately. Isabella found herself processing environmental data with the same unconscious precision that Elena had demonstrated during their training sessions. The first shot struck the target dead center, producing a metallic clang that echoed across the desert valley with satisfying clarity. The second shot landed within inches of the first, followed by 3 more shots that grouped so tightly that spotting scopes were needed to distinguish individual impact points. Master Sergeant Rodriguez lowered his binoculars with an expression that confirmed what Dr. Chun's instruments were recording. Isabella's natural shooting ability, combined with the Pink Barrett's enhanced capabilities, was producing accuracy that matched Elena's performance records during her early Project Silhouette training. "Exceptional initial results," Dr. Chun announced, reviewing data from sensors that monitored everything from rifle vibration to muzzle velocity variations. "Your consistency indicates natural compensation for environmental factors that usually require extensive training to master." The praise was gratifying, but Isabella understood that 1,500-meter shooting was considered routine for Project Silhouette operatives. Elena's legendary status had been earned through performance at distances that exceeded conventional limits by substantial margins. "Ready for the advanced assessment?" Rodriguez asked, pointing toward targets that had been positioned at ranges Isabella had never attempted. "We're going to 2,500 meters. This is where natural ability separates from developed expertise." The distance represented nearly 1.5 miles of atmospheric interference, terrain variation, and ballistic complexity that pushed both equipment and operator to theoretical limits. Isabella had studied Elena's notes about such shots, but had never attempted anything approaching these ranges. Chun began describing environmental factors that would affect the bullet's flight path during the nearly 4 seconds it would take to reach the target. Wind variations at different altitudes, temperature differentials between ground level, and the bullet's maximum trajectory height. Even the Earth's rotation had to be considered for shots at such extreme ranges. Elena's technique for ultra-long-range engagement involved what she called atmospheric reading. Rodriguez explained, showing Isabella charts that documented environmental calculation methods that went far beyond standard military training. She developed an intuitive understanding of how different atmospheric conditions affected bullet flight. Isabella studied the charts while conducting her own assessment of current environmental conditions. The desert air was relatively stable, but thermal currents created by solar heating were generating vertical wind patterns that would affect bullet trajectory in complex ways that required experience to predict accurately. The preparation for the 2,500-meter shot took nearly 20 minutes as Isabella worked through calculations that combined Elena's handwritten notes with her own observations of environmental conditions. The pink Barrett's advanced optics provided targeting information that exceeded anything available with conventional equipment, but ultimate accuracy still depended on the operator's ability to integrate multiple variables into precise firing. Solutions. When Isabella finally squeezed the trigger, the shot felt different from anything she had experienced during normal training. The bullet's flight time seemed endless, creating a period of suspension where atmospheric conditions could change enough to affect accuracy. Despite perfect initial calculations, the distant target produced a metallic ring that indicated successful impact, but spotting the exact hit location required high-powered telescopes that revealed placement within the target's scoring rings. Isabella had achieved what many military marksmen considered impossible: accurate engagement at distances that exceeded conventional sniper doctrine. Outstanding performance, Dr. Chen announced, her scientific enthusiasm evident as she reviewed data from sensors that had monitored every aspect of the shot sequence. Your technique demonstrates an intuitive understanding of ballistic principles that typically require years of specialized training to develop. The successful long-range engagement earned Isabella entry into advanced training protocols that Elena had designed specifically for developing Project Silhouette capabilities. The curriculum included subjects that weren't taught in any conventional military school: advanced meteorology, battlefield psychology, covert movement techniques, and equipment maintenance procedures for classified weapon systems. Over the following weeks, Isabella's training routine evolved to include sessions that pushed both her physical capabilities and mental endurance beyond anything she had experienced during conventional military service. 8-hour shooting sessions in various weather conditions, night operations using specialized optics, and urban environment training that simulated the complex conditions where Project Silhouette operatives were typically deployed. Master Sergeant Rodriguez proved to be an instructor whose teaching methods reflected years of operational experience in environments where mistakes resulted in mission failure or operator death. His training scenarios included realistic stress factors that tested Isabella's ability to maintain precision under conditions that would challenge even experienced combat veterans. Elite marksmanship isn't about perfect shooting conditions, Rodriguez explained during a training session conducted in 40 mph winds that made accurate shooting extremely difficult. Elena's reputation was built on making impossible shots under conditions where conventional marksmen couldn't even attempt engagement. The wind training pushed Isabella to develop techniques for reading atmospheric conditions that most military snipers never encountered. Bullet trajectory calculations became exercises in advanced physics that required understanding of fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, and ballistic coefficient variations that changed with environmental conditions. Dr. Chin's role in Isabella's training involved technical education that went far beyond standard weapons maintenance. The Pink Barrett's modifications incorporated technologies that required specialized knowledge to operate effectively, including computer-assisted ballistic calculation, systems and adaptive optics that automatically compensated for certain environmental factors. Your rifle represents approximately $50 million in research and development investment, Dr. Chun explained during a technical training session. Elena's field testing provided crucial data for improvements that are still being incorporated into current prototype systems. The financial magnitude of what Isabella had inherited reinforced her understanding that Project Silhouette represented strategic investments that extended far beyond individual operator training. The program's classified status protected development costs and capabilities that would reshape military doctrine if their existence became publicly known. 6 weeks into her advanced training, Isabella received notification that her development had progressed to the point where operational assessment was required. Colonel Harrison arrived at the training facility with mission briefings that would test her skills under conditions that approximated actual deployment scenarios. Private Martinez, you're going to participate in a classified operation that will serve as your final evaluation for Project Silhouette candidacy, Harrison announced during a briefing session that included personnel Isabella hadn't seen before. The mission involves precision engagement of hostile targets that threaten American interests overseas. The revelation that Isabella would be participating in actual combat operations rather than training scenarios represented a fundamental escalation in her involvement with classified programs. Elena's notes had warned that Project Silhouette training inevitably led to deployment assignments that couldn't be discussed with anyone outside the program. The mission briefing revealed that Isabella would be operating in a Middle Eastern country where terrorist organizations were developing weapons capabilities that threatened regional stability. Her target was a weapons engineer whose elimination would disrupt production of improvised explosive devices that were killing American soldiers and civilian contractors. The engagement range will be approximately 2,800 meters, Harrison continued, showing satellite imagery of the target area. Environmental conditions include desert heat, variable winds, and urban terrain that complicates ballistic calculations. Isabella studied the mission parameters with growing understanding that this operation would test everything Elena had taught her about long-range precision engagement. The target distance exceeded her training achievements, and the environmental conditions would challenge even the Pink Barrett's advanced capabilities. "Sir, what support will be available during the operation?" Isabella asked, recognizing that solo deployment would represent significant risk for someone with limited operational experience. "You'll be working with a support team that includes spotters, communication specialists, and extraction personnel," Harrison replied. "But the precision engagement will be your responsibility exclusively." The mission represented Isabella's transition from training candidate to operational asset, with performance standards that would determine whether she continued Elena's legacy or returned to conventional military service. The stakes included not just her own career prospects, but the success of operations that affected American strategic interests in volatile regions. Dr. Chun provided final equipment briefings that covered ammunition specifications, optics calibration, and environmental calculation procedures that were specific to the deployment conditions Isabella would encounter. The Pink Barrett's capabilities would be tested under operational conditions that couldn't be replicated in training environments. Elena's longest operational engagement was 3,247 meters, Dr. Chun noted. "Your mission parameters are within the rifle's documented capabilities, but success will depend on your ability to integrate training with real-world conditions that include stress factors we can't simulate." The technical confidence was reassuring, but Isabella understood that operational success required more than equipment capabilities. Elena's legendary status had been earned through mental toughness and adaptive thinking that allowed her to make accurate shots under conditions where failure meant friendly casualties. As Isabella prepared for deployment, she found herself reflecting on the path that had led from a simple shooting demonstration to participation in classified operations that most Americans would never know about. Elena's legacy involved responsibilities that extended far beyond family inheritance, creating obligations to programs that operated in shadows where democratic accountability was replaced by strategic necessity. The pink Barrett M82A1 had become more than a rifle. It was a tool for protecting American interests through methods that couldn't be acknowledged in public, but were considered essential by officials who understood threats that most citizens remained unaware of. Isabella's deployment would test whether she possessed not just Elena's shooting abilities, but her psychological resilience and moral flexibility for operations that required killing people who might never know why they had been targeted by a sniper they would never see. The rooftop in the ancient city of Kandahar felt like standing on the edge of the world as Isabella settled into her final firing position, the pink Barrett's bipod legs finding purchase on concrete that had been baked by decades of desert sun. Below her, the labyrinthine streets hummed with early morning activity as vendors prepared for another day of commerce that would unknowingly provide cover for one of the most significant precision engagements in modern military history. Through her rifle's advanced optics, Isabella could see the target building 2,847 meters away, farther than Elena's legendary record shot, farther than any engagement she had attempted during training. The distance seemed impossible, a mathematical abstraction that challenged both equipment capabilities and human precision beyond documented limits. Master Sergeant Rodriguez crouched beside her with range-finding equipment and atmospheric monitoring devices that provided real-time data for the ballistic calculations that would determine mission success or failure. His voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who had guided similar operations through successful completion. Wind conditions are variable between 200 and 800 meters altitude, Rodriguez reported, studying readings that showed atmospheric complexity requiring adjustment techniques that went beyond standard sniper doctrine. Temperature gradient indicates thermal rising that will affect bullet trajectory during the final 500 meters of flight. Isabella absorbed the environmental data while conducting her own visual assessment of conditions that wouldn't register on electronic instruments. Dust patterns in distant streets, smoke movement from cooking fires, even the behavior of birds at various altitudes provided information about atmospheric conditions that could affect her shot's accuracy. The target was Dr. Hassan Al-Khawari, a weapons engineer whose development of advanced improvised explosive devices had killed 17 American soldiers and countless Afghan civilians during the past 6 months. Intelligence reports indicated that his elimination would disrupt terrorist weapons production for months, while sending a message about the reach of American precision engagement capabilities. What Isabella didn't know, what only Colonel Harrison and a handful of officials in Washington understood, was that Dr. Al-Khawari had once been an asset of American intelligence services, a double agent whose weapons designs had been modified to include flaws that would cause premature detonation among terrorist users. His recent decision to provide unmodified devices to anti-American forces had transformed him from a strategic asset to an immediate threat requiring permanent elimination. Target is visible in the northeast window of the laboratory building, announced Staff Sergeant Lisa Park, the mission spotter, whose high-powered telescopes provided detailed observation of the target area. Dr. Al-Khawari is conducting morning inspection of weapons assembly operations. Isabella adjusted her scope settings while running through the mental calculations that Elena had taught her for extreme range engagements. Bullet drop at 2,847 meters would exceed 40 feet, requiring elevation adjustments that pushed the rifle's optics to their maximum range. Flight time would approach 5 seconds, creating opportunities for environmental changes that could affect accuracy. Despite perfect initial calculations, the pink Barrett felt familiar and comfortable despite the unprecedented nature of the shot she was about to attempt. Elena's modifications had been designed for exactly this type of engagement, incorporating technological advances that provided capabilities beyond conventional military equipment, while maintaining the reliability necessary for operational success. Environmental conditions are as stable as we're likely to see. Dr. Chun's voice crackled through Isabella's earpiece from a command center hundreds of miles away. Computer modeling indicates 94% probability of target engagement within acceptable parameters. The technical confidence provided reassurance, but Isabella understood that ultimate success depended on her ability to integrate training with operational stress that couldn't be replicated in controlled environments. The weight of the mission extended beyond individual performance to strategic implications that would affect American operations throughout the region. Isabella's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that Elena had taught her for managing stress during critical moments. The rifle's scope revealed details of the target building with clarity that made Dr. Al-Khawari's movements clearly visible despite the enormous distance separating them. Through the crosshairs, she could see a middle-aged man in civilian clothes, examining weapons components with the systematic attention of someone whose technical expertise had made him valuable to multiple competing organizations. His movements were casual, unhurried, suggesting no awareness that American snipers had positioned themselves at a distance that exceeded conventional engagement doctrine. "Target is stationary in optimal position," Park reported. "Window opening provides a clear shot opportunity with minimal environmental interference." Isabella made final adjustments to her firing position while running through the sequence Elena had drilled into her during countless training sessions. Sight picture, breathing control, trigger manipulation. Follow through, the fundamentals that remain constant regardless of distance or operational complexity. The trigger squeeze felt like every other shot Isabella had fired during training, smooth and deliberate with no jerky movement that could affect accuracy. The rifle's recoil was substantial but manageable, absorbed through proper body position and equipment, design that channeled energy away from the shooter's frame. The bullet's flight seemed to last forever, creating a period of suspended time where atmospheric conditions could change enough to affect impact despite perfect initial calculations. Isabella maintained her shooting position while watching through the scope for impact indicators that would reveal whether her shot had achieved its intended effect. The result was visible through high-powered optics before the sound of impact could travel back across the 2,847 meters separating shooter from target. Dr. Al-Khawari collapsed immediately, the precision of the engagement evident in his instantaneous incapacitation that indicated perfect shot placement despite the extreme range. "Target down," Park announced with professional satisfaction. Clean engagement with immediate effect. Isabella felt a surge of accomplishment mixed with the sobering reality that she had just killed another human being from a distance so great that her target never knew he was being hunted. Elena's training had prepared her for the technical aspects of extreme range shooting, but the psychological implications of operational killing required mental adjustment that would continue long after the mission concluded. "Outstanding performance," Rodriguez announced as Isabella began securing her equipment for extraction. That shot exceeded Elena's operational record and established new benchmarks for Project Silhouette capabilities. The technical achievement was significant, but Isabella understood that her success represented more than individual marksmanship excellence. She had demonstrated that Elena's training methods and equipment modifications could produce operational results that exceeded previous performance standards. Validating years of classified development investment, the extraction from Kandahar proceeded smoothly through routes that had been planned to avoid areas where Dr. Al-Khawari's associates might discover the circumstances of his death quickly enough to threaten the American team's departure. Isabella found herself reflecting on the mission's broader implications during the helicopter flight that carried her away from her first operational killing, back at Fort Meridian 3 days later. Isabella sat in Colonel Harrison's office reviewing mission reports that documented her performance in clinical detail. The successful engagement had generated interest from officials whose authority extended far beyond normal military command structures, creating opportunities for assignments that would define her career trajectory for years to come. "Private Martinez, your operational performance has exceeded all expectations," Harrison announced, spreading documents across his desk that outlined advancement opportunities within Project Silhouette and related classified programs. "You've demonstrated capabilities that qualify you for assignment to our most sensitive operations." The promotion opportunities included rank advancement, specialized training, and deployment assignments that would provide professional development unavailable through conventional military service. Isabella would be following Elena's career path into programs that operated beyond normal accountability structures, with responsibilities that carried both exceptional privileges and permanent obligations. "Sir, I want to continue Elena's work," Isabella replied with confidence earned through successful operational performance. "But I also want to understand what happened to her and whether the people responsible have been completely eliminated." Harrison's expression revealed that Isabella's question touched on aspects of Elena's death that remained classified beyond her current authorization level. The investigation into hostile intelligence operations that had targeted Project Silhouette personnel involved ongoing activities that couldn't be discussed in detail. "Private Martinez, Elena's death has been avenged through appropriate channels," Harrison said carefully. "The organization responsible for targeting our operatives has been disrupted, but intelligence threats against Project Silhouette personnel continue to require security measures that will affect your future assignments." The ongoing security concerns meant that Isabella's operational career would include risks that extended beyond normal combat deployment. Foreign intelligence services remained interested in acquiring Project Silhouette technology and operational information, creating persistent threats that required constant vigilance and security protocols. 6 months later, Isabella found herself back at Fort Meridian's Advanced Marksmanship Training Center, but this time as an instructor rather than a student. Her successful operational deployment had qualified her to train other candidates for Project Silhouette participation, continuing Elena's legacy through knowledge transfer to the next generation of elite marksmen. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now occupied a position similar to the one held by Staff Sergeant Kane, whose mockery of her pink rifle had triggered the chain of events that led to her current status. The difference was that Isabella understood the importance of recognizing exceptional ability, regardless of its initial appearance or the assumptions it challenged. Her first group of trainees included soldiers whose backgrounds and motivations varied considerably, but who shared the natural shooting abilities that made them candidates for advancement beyond conventional military marksmanship programs. Isabella found herself looking for students who demonstrated the same intuitive understanding of ballistic principles that Elena had recognized in her years earlier. "Today we're going to establish baseline performance parameters," Isabella announced to her new trainees, using the same words Master Sergeant Rodriguez had spoken during her own introduction to advanced training. "Some of you may discover capabilities you didn't know you possessed." The pink Barrett M82A1 remained in Isabella's possession, but now served as a training tool for demonstrating the capabilities that classified weapons modifications could provide to operatives with appropriate skills and security clearances. The rifle had become a symbol of advancement opportunities that rewarded excellence while demanding discretion about activities that most Americans would never know about. During quiet moments between training sessions, Isabella often found herself Thinking about Elena and the path that had led from family tragedy to operational success that exceeded her sister's legendary achievements. The journey had required sacrifices and commitments that changed her fundamental understanding of military service and personal identity. The mockery that had greeted her pink rifle seemed like a lifetime ago, though barely a year had passed since her first demonstration at Fort Meridian Standard Shooting Range. The laughter of fellow trainees had been replaced by the respect accorded to operatives whose capabilities were measured in strategic impact rather than training scores. Isabella had discovered that exceptional ability often comes disguised in forms that challenge conventional assumptions about capability and appearance. The pink rifle had been dismissed as a novelty by people who couldn't recognize advanced technology hidden beneath unconventional presentation, just as Isabella herself had been underestimated because her appearance didn't match stereotypical expectations about elite military operatives. Elena's legacy lived on through Isabella's continued service in programs that pushed the boundaries of what democratic societies typically authorize their military forces to accomplish. The pink Barrett had become more than a rifle. It was a symbol of capabilities that existed in shadows where accountability was measured by results rather than transparency. As Isabella watched her new trainees attempt their first long-range engagements, she understood that she had become part of something larger than individual achievement or family legacy. Project Silhouette represented American military capabilities that operated beyond public awareness, using technologies and techniques that would reshape global power balances. If their existence became widely known, the drill sergeants who had mocked her pink rifle could never have imagined that their dismissive laughter would motivate the development of an operative whose capabilities would exceed anything they considered possible. Isabella had proven that underestimation was a weapon that worked both ways. Those who dismissed exceptional ability based on superficial judgments often discovered too late that they had misjudged capabilities that could reshape their understanding of what was achievable. The shot that had eliminated Dr. Al-Khawari at 2,847 meters had established new benchmarks for human precision engagement, but it had also confirmed that Elena's training methods and equipment modifications could produce results that exceeded previous limitations. Isabella had become living proof that exceptional legacy could be inherited, developed, and enhanced through commitment to excellence that refused to accept conventional boundaries. In the end, the pink rifle had silenced more than skeptical drill sergeants. It had eliminated threats to American interests while establishing capabilities that would protect soldiers and civilians for generations to come. Isabella Martinez had transformed from underestimated trainee to elite operative, carrying forward Elena's legacy while creating her own legend in programs that most people would never know existed. 2 years after her record-breaking shot in Kandahar, Isabella stood before a classified Pentagon briefing room filled with generals and intelligence officials whose careers had been built on understanding military capabilities that pushed the boundaries of conventional warfare. The presentation she was delivering would influence defense spending decisions worth billions of dollars and operational doctrines that would shape American military strategy for decades. Project Silhouette has demonstrated engagement capabilities that exceed previous theoretical limitations, Isabella announced, using laser pointers to highlight performance data that documented her operational achievements across 3 continents. Current prototype systems are ready for expanded deployment, pending authorization for increased production. The audience included officials whose security clearances granted access to America's most sensitive military programs, but even they seemed impressed by the technical achievements that Isabella's operational success had validated. Her record shot had proven that human-machine integration could produce results that exceeded computer modeling predictions when properly trained operators used advanced equipment systems. General Patricia Hawkins, the Pentagon's Deputy Chief of Staff for Special Operations, leaned forward with obvious interest in the operational implications of Isabella's achievements. Major Martinez, what are the training requirements for producing additional operatives with capabilities comparable to your demonstrated performance? The promotion to Major had come with Isabella's assignment to program development responsibilities that went far beyond individual operational deployment. She now served as the primary liaison between Project Silhouette, field operations, and the research institutions that continued advancing the technologies Elena had helped develop. Ma'am, current training protocols can produce operatives capable of effective engagement at ranges exceeding 2,500 meters within 18 months of program entry, Isabella replied, consulting notes that documented the development timelines for candidates she had personally trained. Advanced capabilities require natural aptitude combined with intensive specialized education. The briefing continued for 2 hours as Isabella detailed recruitment criteria, equipment specifications, and deployment strategies that would expand Project Silhouette from experimental program to operational capability, available for regional commanders facing threats that conventional forces couldn't address effectively. Admiral Robert Chun, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, posed questions about the program's scalability and the security measures necessary to protect technologies that represented significant strategic advantages over potential adversaries. His concerns reflected institutional understanding that advanced capabilities also created vulnerabilities if hostile intelligence services gained access to classified technical information. Major, how do we prevent foreign replication of these capabilities while expanding domestic implementation? Admiral Chun asked, addressing concerns that had troubled military planners since Elena's assassination had demonstrated enemy interest. In acquiring Project Silhouette assets, Isabella's response drew on her operational experience and Elena's posthumous intelligence about foreign efforts to develop competing long-range precision engagement capabilities. Sir, our technical advantages derive from integration of multiple classified technologies that would require years of independent development for adversaries to replicate. Security protocols focus on protecting component specifications rather than overall system capabilities. The strategy involved compartmentalizing technical information so that compromise of individual elements wouldn't enable complete system replication by hostile organizations. Isabella had become an expert in balancing operational effectiveness with security requirements that protected American technological superiority. Following the Pentagon briefing, Isabella returned to Fort Meridian to continue training responsibilities that had expanded to include international students from allied nations whose military forces required enhanced precision engagement capabilities. The pink Barrett had become the centerpiece of demonstrations that showcased American weapons technology to foreign military officials whose countries faced similar terrorist threats. Her latest group of trainees included operators from British SAS, German KSK, and Canadian JTF-2 units whose governments had requested access to Project Silhouette training methods through classified cooperation agreements. Isabella found herself teaching techniques that Elena had developed to soldiers whose backgrounds provided different perspectives on precision engagement applications. Captain James Wellington of the British SAS approached Isabella after a particularly challenging training session that had tested long-range shooting under adverse weather conditions. His curiosity about the pink Barrett's modifications reflected professional interest in equipment that could enhance his unit's operational capabilities. Major Martinez, the accuracy improvements your rifle demonstrates seem to exceed what barrel modifications alone could produce, Wellington observed with the analytical mind of someone trained to evaluate military technology. Are there propellant or projectile enhancements that contribute to the performance advantages? Isabella's response required careful balance between sharing enough information to maintain training effectiveness while protecting classified technical details that remained restricted to American personnel. Captain, the enhanced performance results from integration of multiple system improvements that work synergistically to extend effective engagement range. The diplomatic answer satisfied Wellington's curiosity while avoiding disclosure of specific ammunition formulations and optical enhancements that remained classified above his authorization level. Isabella had learned to navigate information, sharing protocols that maintained alliance cooperation without compromising American technological advantages. As evening approached, Isabella found herself alone on the advanced training range where her journey from mocked trainee to elite instructor had begun. The pink Barrett rested on a maintenance table, its distinctive coating now bearing the subtle wear marks that came from extensive operational use. Across multiple deployments and training environments, that she thought about Elena and the path that had led from family tragedy to professional achievement that exceeded her sister's legendary status. The journey had required sacrifices and commitments that most military personnel would never face, but it had also provided opportunities to serve her country in ways that made strategic differences in global security. The laughter that it greeted her pink rifle during that first training demonstration seemed impossible to believe, given the respect that the weapon now commanded from military professionals around the world. Isabella had proven that exceptional capability often came disguised in forms that challenged conventional expectations about performance and appearance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as Isabella prepared for her next operational deployment. A classified mission that would test Project Silhouette capabilities against threats that conventional military forces couldn't address effectively. The pink Barrett would once again prove that underestimation was a mistake that hostile forces made at their own peril. Elena's spirit lived on through every shot Isabella fired and every student she trained, carrying forward a legacy of excellence that had transformed American precision engagement capabilities while honoring the memory of a sister whose sacrifice had made such achievements possible. The pink rifle had become more than a weapon. It was a symbol of determination that refused to accept limitations imposed by those who couldn't recognize exceptional potential when it challenged their assumptions about what was achievable. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.